All right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. So we're going to talk about food security. There's been flooding, the locusts are still there. Joining me now on Skype is Stephen Muchiri. He's the CEO, Eastern African Farmers Federation. Thank you so much for making time for us, Stephen. So right now, paint for me an outlook of what's happening on the ground right now. What are the farmers telling you that are their biggest challenges as we speak?
Yes, thank you, Trevor, and good morning. For me, I think that we're having a triple or four-way challenge, just like you've actually mentioned. We're having currently the problem of COVID, and then we're having issues related to climate change. Like you rightly said, we just came from, or actually through desert locust challenge. We are now facing flooding. And FAO has actually projected that it actually face famine. And the impact of COVID, as we speak at the moment, has been disruption of basically all value chains. All agricultural value chains have actually been disrupted. We can actually see when it comes to market, farmers have had challenges accessing inputs. For example, some programs we have in Kenya, I think we've only attained about 40% of planting for the current season. And unfortunately, now that 40% has been affected by floods. They're still trying to look at the impact of these floods. I've actually lost already 5 farmers as a result of we have had challenges with logistics. And what happens with logistics is that we have problems moving trucks, having it stored. And I think you saw the other day, they'll talk about aflatoxin on most of the maize and grain that are actually been stored. And you know we have changes and capacities around preservation and storage of vegetables and fruit. So a lot of those are actually going to waste. The other issue we've been having is finance. You can imagine agriculture has always faced the challenge of accessing affordable finance. With the issues that I've mentioned, it's even a bigger challenge now in terms of even getting finances to mitigate some of the challenges that. And of course, the issue of labor. A lot of medium-scale farms and maybe large-scale farms actually rely on some of the farmers. They actually employ some of them. But with the social distancing and all the stigma that has actually created as a result of COVID, we're having problems of planting farms. Some of those small farmers actually finance their farms through this kind of employment. So it's been quite a challenge when it comes to that. Of course, we've had a problem of policy. And I'm sure you can actually bear witness that it's been very unclear, very uncertain, and there's quite a bit of confusion because of the mess. It's a general policy guidance that has been given by, of course, the ministry. But I believe is that then every ministry is supposed to domesticate or internalize that general message. Look at how then does it the ministry, and how do you actually give some level of policy guidance to the ministry. If you remember very well, we started off by almost talking and starting Ministry of Agriculture announced how we are going to support agriculture in terms of food and so on.
Yeah.
But I've not heard about that, the finances of that, the implications of that, or the impact of those things, and how things actually are. And the last one, because we have a lot of time, is the issue of awareness. You realize that we are all panicking when the disease started getting into because we felt that they were actually ill prepared. They were actually ill prepared for it. Now, when you look at the farming community, there has been a challenge of awareness. Yeah. So farmers are still not, clearly aware about the issue of city, how to protect themselves. So maybe it's still very general, but we feel that agriculture and the role it plays in this sector, in terms of GDP growth in Kenya, for example. So we need more effort in terms of creating more awareness. So farmers have been arrested for not wearing nose masks in the village. So I mean, it's better.
Yeah, and Muchiri, the other question is the quarterly food security outlook released last month by the Famine Early Warning System Network showed that at least 17 counties, most of them in dry regions, will suffer shortages of maize between February and May. As it stands right now, do you believe that because the Ministry of Agriculture is planning to import 4 million bags of maize to avert the shortage and also to deal with COVID-19, is there an actual shortage from where you stand?
These I'm going to respond to that question. However, for the last so many years, government has played service to agriculture, in terms of support. The biggest challenge we have in agriculture is we lack sufficient, consistent, and sustainable investment. And these investments are only come on board if there's the right policies on board. And in Kenya, for example, which I think in East Africa is the only country where capacity around, we hardly use 30% of that stock. So I can tell you for a fact, when you have a shock here in this country, I don't think we can go more season without actually importing food. So the challenge we have here is an issue of storage, an issue of agro-processing, an issue of even preservation. But when we produce the product is actually and naturally strong, we need to broaden our capacities beyond just grain, to be able to store vegetables, to be able to store fruits and milk and all these things. That's the biggest challenge. So your statistics is actually correct. We are having a looming shortage in terms of, as we speak, like I've said, I mean, we've been in the fields and the last season and the picture of what is actually happening as we speak. Whatever's in the field, like I said, we had done about 40%. And if we went to most of the agro sector, there's still a lot of seed that has actually not been planted, a lot of fertilizer that has not been actually taken up by the farmers. So in that aspect, we are actually going to have a challenge in terms of production. When you then couple that with this that talks about poor storage, it tells you that definitely in a season or two, we may actually need to replenish our stock from wherever. So that's.
So now the other concern, as you're speaking about storage, and the farmers are saying that in as much as this shortage is there, they still have their grains getting spoiled in their granaries. Is this
exactly? Exactly. So you see, how do I put it? We have very poor capacities when it comes to harvest, handling and post-harvest management. And there are two ways. One is that at the farmer level, the storage conditions are to the extent that you can't keep maize for long. And if there's the challenge of of harvesting, we actually exposed to what we call aflatoxin. Yeah, that's the first. Second challenge has been that I think government in the last did not buy a lot from the farmers. Yeah, we had a challenge of even delivering that maize to government to actually store it in their granaries. A lot of companies that are actually buying are actually milling and putting that to market. So that's the biggest challenge. But one of the proposals we actually have with respect going forward is actually around how do we enhance our capacities around process, preservation, and storage. So that just like countries like India or the UK, where they can actually store, or they actually have capacity to store for up to 5 years, we can actually have the same kind of capacity here. And so whenever we have a shock, there's all the maize coming from Uganda, coming from Tanzania, because we have a capacity in terms of proper stock.
So Muchiri, I'm trying to understand this issue. When we talk about storage capacity, are we talking about the granaries themselves? Are we talking about the chemicals that are needed to store these maize grains? Or are we talking about us not investing in technology well enough that can then dry these grains? Because what we still do is the normal sun drying. Is that sufficient?
It's all those things that you talked about. Yeah, it's all those things that you talked about. One, is we don't have enough capacity
Yeah.
to be able to. Like I said, even the capacity we have, despite it being small, we do about 20-30%. Two, our capacity is only around grain. We need to expand that capacity to food, vegetables, and other meat products, so we mostly preserve long. Okay? We actually need to build food reserve that can actually last us in 3 and 5 years. Because what happens is that when you don't have storage capacity, when you have a stock in the then we have a price hike. What happens in countries that actually are able to store, they're able to actually release that product into the market and make it actually affordable for consumers. So hence they're able to manage price spike. So as we speak now, and for me, capacity can be at the national level, can be at the subnational level, can be at the farmer level. So we have to invest that going forward because, however, like the previous speaker in the program talk says, we're starting to have climate events that are regular. We just came from drought. Then we had the desert locust. Now we have been, this pandemic. Then we are now again in flood. These events are becoming more regular, and it's going to be disruptive when it comes to, production. So we actually need to think about how do we manage post-production.
Yeah.
But if we create an incentive, not only for the smallholder farmers, but even for the medium-scale farmers, that can actually have market as a result of, increasing your productivity, then that incentive alone can actually help build our capacities, and we can actually diversify that. So then we don't have even a chance of nutrition, because if we just stock grain alone, then you have nutrition issues, going forward in case you have, big stock.
Yeah.
But one of the things that we also tend to recommend is there being, as a result of COVID and as a result of these challenges of climate, a fund, like a pandemic fund.
Yeah.
A fund that can be converted into a special emergency fund that can actually be used, to manage or mitigate these disasters as and when it comes.
Okay.
You actually need to have that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Stephen Muchiri, stay with me for a bit. I'm crossing over to Eldoret to speak to some of the farmers on the ground. Then I'll come back to you and talk about the age issue, because we know the average age of a farmer in Kenya now is 60, and yet 78% of the population now are youth. We'll try to find out why they're not being attracted to farming. But for now, I want to speak to the people on the ground, those who are actually the farmers there. They're speaking to John Wanyama, who's joining us live from Eldoret, I believe. John, good morning. It's good to see you, man. So how is this locust and the flooding combined powers to sort of renege on the gains that the farmers have made so far? Wanyama, I don't know whether you can hear me now. The question is, how has the floods and drought and the locust affected the farmers there where you are right now? All right, you seem to be having a slight challenge there with the John Wanyama.
Okay, Trevor, good morning. And in Uasin Gishu, as maybe in the few days ago, we saw locusts here in Uasin Gishu, but they never really made any destruction as per that time, since there were no crops in the farm. But as per now, what farmers are really crying over is the heavy rainfall that is now washing away their maize from the farm. And most of farmers, especially in Moiben and Soy and the Ziwa area in the Uasin Gishu County, they will be forced to replant their maize again this year because of the heavy rain they are witnessing. And also farmers, this being the breadbasket of this country, Trevor, farmers are saying they haven't received fertilizer they required from the national government, and they are worried that if the trend continues like this, if they will not receive that CN fertilizer on time, then Kenya is at risk maybe to have food shortage in the near future. Remember, Uasin Gishu County produces almost 4 million bags of maize per year. So if this one will be if this year will be bad and maybe the harvest will be shorter than whatever they produce, and then that means that the country is at risk of not having enough food. But I have two farmers here. Let me talk to one of them first. Your name, sir, and maybe what are some of the main challenges you are facing now? Locust, heavy rainfall, lack of fertilizer.
Okay, my name is David Kiprotich. I'm a farmer from soy consistency. Now on the side of food production or food security, we are seeing some problems lying ahead. Since 2018, cereal boards have not been in a position to purchase maize from the farmers. So this government has not put several measures to protect the farmers compared to other countries all over the world. So I think the problem with Kenya, we have mixed the politics with farming, where the politicians come to speak on behalf of farmers, while in the real sense they don't know about the pain of producing these foods in our country. Yeah.
And maybe how has rain affected you? Do you think you are going to have enough harvest this year? Do you have enough fertilizer?
In this country, the farms are so affected, they have been washed away. Mainly the main affected constituency is Moiben constituency and soy. The menace of floods, the government should come up with the ways, the measures to curb these menace of floods. In the past governments, they have not been unable to protect its citizens on the menace of floods. We have seen what is now happening in Budalangi, some parts of Turkana County. So there is anger lying ahead, Mr. Wanyama. Yes.
Maybe as per now, we are still seeing some trucks lining up here to sell their maize to maybe brokers, middlemen. What is the problem, and how much are you selling per bag?
Since now we have seen our TVs, the measures the government now are put on the truck drivers. Out the truck drivers, they have been given condition that they have to be tested within 48 hours for the drivers who are going outside the country. Now we are seeing only there's a problem lying ahead on the food coming from the outside the country. Yes.
And maybe finally, as you conclude, we have been told that farmers, you are still holding on maize. You are not releasing especially to maize millers around. What's the problem? Are you still waiting for the higher prices?
I think Mr. Munya is lying there, and he should tell us where he got the intelligence. He should just tell us, because the maize we still have some maize in some parts, and there are some parts, some counties, we don't have to see ourselves as Wasingishu County. There are also citizens from other counties who are suffering, and they'll be suffering, yes, with anger.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Mr. Kolum, if I could just finalize with you, what are some of these main challenges you are facing as a farmer? And maybe have you reduced your land that you used to farm this year?
Thank you very much, Mr. Wanyama. My name is Saraf Kolum, a farmer from Soy in Wasingishu County. This year of 2020, we have had challenges beginning from March. It has rained too much. We had planted maize that's been washed away. And as I speak, I've lost about 10 acres that is planted now. Even if you try going to the farm, you will get stuck there. So we have challenges, and we are requesting Mr. Munya, Honorable Munya, who is the Minister for Agriculture, if you could spare some time to visit farmers from Rift Valley, then he should do that immediately. Then I'm sorry to inform him that he has messed us up, because he promised to deliver enough fertilizer for planting, and he has not done that. He's coming in very low delivery. What they are delivering is too small, it's not enough for us. Well, we have heard some little from Kenya National Trading Corporation, that's KNTC, and I wish he had extended to Kitale and another parts of Rift Valley. And as I speak now, I wish he had not imported maize, because when you look at my back here, lorries are lining up to deliver maize, to wait their maize and deliver maize to middlemen here, because he has failed to open National and Produce Board stores so that we would have delivered our maize there. So I can see hunger looming, because if he's not able to put maize in the government stores, then if this pandemic of coronavirus will continue, then all of us will not die of corona, but we shall die of hunger. Most people will die of hunger. But in Wasingishu County, where I come from, farmers still have maize in their stores. I wish you could open national stores even for 21 days. unless you have another question, Mr. Wanyama.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kolum. Thank you very much. Trevor, as you have heard from farmers, whatever they are saying, they are raising some concerns that the government should not be thinking of importing maize as per now, since they are saying they still have maize in Uasin Gishu County, especially large-scale farmers. As my cameraman can show you, Trevor, behind me, these are trucks that are just lining up just to come here and deliver their maize to a middleman who wants to buy them at a throwaway price. Though the maize is not, the price of maize is not that bad this year. But what farmers are wondering, Trevor, is that why will the government not will not open the cereals board? From last year up to now, they have not opened their doors. What they are saying now, they are being now misused by the middlemen, and they had this maize, and they're wondering why will the government again start having plans to import maize, and still yet they have maize. As you have heard from Mr. Kolum, he's saying he has lost 10 acres of maize that he planted last week or 1 month ago. Now he'll be forced to plant just because of heavy rainfall. Trevor.
Thanks, John. That's John Wanyama speaking to us live from Eldoret and speaking to farmers there. It's fascinating that the farmers say that they have enough grain in their stock, but the National Cereals and Produce Board stores have not been opened since last year, and yet we are about to import 4 million bags. They are complaining that there's a chain, the supply chain there is where the problem is. They have to deal with the middlemen, and yet the stores are right where they can see them, and now when they hear that there's a shortage, they don't understand it. And Stephen Muchiri is still with me as the CEO, Eastern Africa Farmers Federation. Stephen, see, it's a fascinating fact that the farmers are talking about. It's exactly what you were saying earlier on the terms of issues of storage. So how do we get ourselves out of this situation that we are in right now?
Well, it's a big challenge. And I think it's something we've always talked about. Especially because one of the biggest problems you have in agriculture is lack of data. Like the farmers were saying, they have maize, but you don't know how much maize they actually have. So we have a challenge of lack of data. I think it's something we have tried to present to governments in the countries that we actually work in. How do we actually invest more in ways to help us collect data, be able to make better decisions? That's a challenge. So as for now, I think what the government can do is that we need to look at how we can mop the grain that the farmers actually have, because like the farmers say, they can see challenges, ahead. So how do we support them in terms of just buying whatever they actually have, so that then we actually know how much we need to stock up in terms of input. However, the challenge I was talking about in terms of big services is what the farmers actually say. We've had problems of interference and interest in agriculture. Every so often, we open up the borders and import without any filling. So what happens is that when all these grain comes to the country, there's no controlling how much actually comes. It ends up affecting almost 2 seasons of crop, because prices become depressed. You heard of last year farmers losing, stopping to grow grain, maize, and start getting into other commodities. So that's the impact of this. So there's actually lack of incentive and motivation to actually continuously grow, maize, which is more or less a position of food security in this country. So we need to look at how we do invest in data. I talked about storage. We look at how we improve on capacity around storage. I talked about the fund, which is supposed to help in terms of mitigating against these climate shocks and events. There's something I want to talk about, which we don't talk a lot about. You see, Kenya cannot produce sufficiently for itself. Okay? That is a challenge, and I think we know that. And that's why we have East Africa. That's why we rely on our neighbors. And I think one of the things that this is actually showing us is that we need to figure out how to actually be able to trade better with our neighbors. I think I would be happier if we are importing maize from just the region, the US and all these places. We're importing rice from Tanzania and from Pakistan and all these places. so that we're actually able to build our food capacity sufficient. These countries in East Africa have different levels of capacity. I think there are countries that can actually produce probably better than others. There are countries that have better infrastructure capacity of whatever it is that produce better than others. And I think we know where Kenya actually falls in the push. I think it's something that we need to really think about, going forward.
All right. Thanks, Stephen. That's Stephen Muchiri, CEO, Eastern Africa Farmers Federation, talking to us about food security.